There's something strange about talking seriously about Superman in 2025. He's the most recognizable superhero on Earth, more icon than character. Yet every generation seems to wrestle with the same question: how do you make him feel human again? James Gunn's take is already loaded with expectation, not just because it's a new era for DC, but because Superman is bigger than any studio. He's a cultural litmus test. When we look at him, we're also looking at ourselves, our ideals, and what we want a hero to be right now. So the real question isn't just whether this new movie will be good, it's whether Superman still has the power to move us, to inspire us, and ultimately, to matter. In a world where superheroes have been deconstructed, memed, and commodified to death, what does it mean for Superman to stand tall again? When you talk about Superman on film, you really have to start in the late 70s. Richard Donner's Superman the movie wasn't just a superhero blockbuster, it was the blueprint. It gave us the sense of wonder, the John Williams theme that still gives people chills, and Christopher Reeve's balance of kindness and strength. The sequels kept that version alive into the 80s, though with mixed results. The 90s brought their own flavor, from Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman on TV, to Superman the Animated Series, which arguably gave us one of the most consistent portrayals of the character outside the comics. Then came Smallville in the 2000s, a series that stretched Clark Kent's origin story across a decade. It reintroduced Superman to a younger audience, leaned into character drama, and showed how flexible the mythology could be. By the mid-2000s, Bryan Singer's Superman Returns tried to recapture the Donner magic, but it didn't quite land the way the studio had hoped. That set the stage for Zack Snyder's Man of Steel in 2013, which shifted everything. Suddenly, Superman was framed in a heavier, more mythic lens, a sharp break from the bright optimism of the Reeve era. Love it or not, Snyder's vision never fully had the chance to play out the way he intended, and maybe things would have looked different if it had. But all of that leads us here, to James Gunn, who's not just rebooting Superman again, but taking a noticeably different approach. At the heart of Gunn's approach is an idea that feels deceptively simple. Superman is both human and myth, ordinary and extraordinary. Rather than leaning into deconstruction or gritty reinvention, Gunn seems intent on rediscovering what made the character resonate in the first place. A man raised in Kansas, trying to do the right thing, who just happens to be a god among mortals. The concept isn't to strip away the iconography, but to reframe it in a way that feels contemporary. Superman as a figure of hope who still smiles, still struggles with belonging, and still represents ideals we don't want to lose sight of. In a way, it's less about redefining Superman and more about recentering him. That philosophy bled into the production itself. Gunn and his team reportedly emphasized a visual language that felt open, bright, and approachable, a deliberate contrast to the desaturated palettes we've often seen in modern superhero films. Shooting in real locations, particularly Cleveland and Atlanta, gave the movie a grounded texture, but the framing and color design kept things closer to comic book vibrancy than urban bleakness. Everything from the updated costume textures to the way Metropolis is lit was meant to reflect clarity, a city worth saving and a hero who feels like he belongs in it. Gunn's crystal clear vision, as his production designer called it, wasn't just about spectacle but about tone, giving audiences the sense that Superman's world is one worth aspiring towards. Of course, all of this is anchored by the cast and the choices around them. David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan were the foundation, but Gunn surrounded them with a deliberately eclectic supporting lineup. Heroes like Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, Metamorpho, and even Guy Gardner in all his bowl-cut glory. It's not just a Justice League movie, but it's a reminder that Superman exists in a larger world, and that his story shapes how those heroes see themselves. These decisions, who's cast, how they look, and what the film sounds like, all feed back into the same goal: a Superman who feels timeless, yet unmistakably new. Superman opened strong, earning over $600 million worldwide and securing the title of the year's top-grossing superhero movie. Reviews lean positive, with critics praising its hopeful tone, vibrant style, and chemistry between David and Rachel, even if some felt the ensemble occasionally crowded the story or wasn't as fleshed out as it could be. On Rotten Tomatoes, it holds an 83%, with audiences giving it an A- cinema score and an 86% post-track rating. While it didn't shatter box office records, the film was profitable, well-received, and most importantly, seen as a successful relaunch of Superman, setting the stage for James Gunn's larger DCU plans. Honestly, I really enjoyed Superman. It felt very James Gunn, sincere, funny in the right spots, and just self-aware enough without ever undercutting the heart of the story. It wasn't as wild or edgy as some of his earlier work, but that makes sense. This is Superman after all, and there's a certain responsibility that comes with handling the character. What we got instead was a film that delivered almost exactly what I expected. A hopeful human take on the Man of Steel that still carried Gunn's fingerprints all over it. It hit the balance I was hoping for, and walking out of the theater, I felt like Superman finally fit again. For the rest of the video there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, go watch it and come back. Superman in this new film, it's strange. Because the first thing that stuck with me wasn't him flying through buildings or punching gods, it was him saving a squirrel, and that's deliberate. It reframes him from the jump. Then there's his talk with Lois, where he drops that new punk rock line. It shouldn't work, it should feel like a corny attempt at relevance, but somehow it doesn't. It hits like a thesis statement for the whole movie. His intervention in the war is probably the boldest choice. He doesn't just win, he gets his ass handed to him, and the fact that he comes back smiling almost makes the defeat the point. Krypto shows up as well, not in some cheap fanservice way, but grounding him in his weird, earnest domesticity. His parents' change adds a weight that past versions never touched, and even the robots have flavor, if that makes sense. They're textured, and ultimately they matter. And all of this together makes him feel less like an untouchable icon and more like someone fumbling toward an ethic that actually means something. The side characters are handled in a great albeit short way. The Justice League doesn't come off like idealized heroes, they're killing enemies outright, and the movie doesn't shy away from showing the weight of that. Though given the real-life equivalent of who they are fighting, it's impossible not to appreciate them. Mr. Terrific's introduction is probably the most exciting part for new viewers. He's presented clearly, with enough presence that you immediately understand why he matters. Hawkgirl shows up too, and even though her role is brief, it's easily one of the best uses of her on screen. I would have liked to have seen more of her or Guy, but that's not a huge problem. Lex Luthor's allies aren't just faceless henchmen either, they have a point, and you see how his influence actually spreads. Then you've got that alien driving the prisoners around, which could have been nothing, but it ends up being one of those odd, memorable details. And the monkeys leaving comments, it sounds ridiculous, but it gives the whole movie this strange kind of flavor, like even the margins of the story are alive. Pretty much every aspect of the film has something memorable about it. At the core, the film is about Superman versus Lex, but it's not the usual billionaire schemer versus alien god story. Lex here isn't just evil, he's rational in a way that feels uncomfortably familiar. The logic of empire and the logic of control. And Superman's resistance of that is messy, it isn't clean, and that's where the movie actually says something. It's impossible not to think of real-world parallels, especially with how openly it mirrors the language of occupation and war. The comparisons aren't subtle, and the film doesn't try to make them subtle. The Justice League killing, Superman refusing, Lex weaponizing order, it's all framed around the question of what power looks like when it insists it's righteous, and that's where the film hits hardest. It refuses to give us the comfort of a clean win, instead leaving us with a Superman who smiles after defeat because the fight itself is the point. So where does all this leave Superman and the universe around him? The film feels less like a closed loop and more like the start of something bigger. You can see the groundwork being laid with Peacemaker sliding into the edges of this world, and with Supergirl already being teased as the next big arrival. I'll admit, I'm not completely sold on this totally working out, but I'm choosing not to fall into cynicism. But the strength of this film makes it hard not to be optimistic. If Superman is the foundation, and if Supergirl can carry the same strange mix of sincerity and bite, then maybe DC has finally found a way to build a cinematic world that doesn't just chase Marvel's shadow. I love this movie, full stop, and for the first time in a long time, I'm actually looking forward to what comes next. With all that being said, I'm curious what you guys have to say. What did you think of the film? If you had any criticism, what would it be? For me, it would be the lack of depth explored for some of the Justice League. Be sure to let me know in the comments below. Thanks for making it until the end of the video. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Here at Inner Spiral, we cover the games, shows, and movies we all love, so be sure to join us, and I'll see you next time in the Spiral.